Hi and welcome to Tabletop Gaming. My name is Charlie and today we're going to do a quick overview of Splendor Duel. Now this is the two-person variant of the popular game and I have absolutely loved it recently, so I think now is a good time to give you an idea of how to play, how to set up your first game and why you should play it too. Now I always play this with friends, so I've never actually opened my copy. Let's do that today. Now as we take the lid off, inside we have the rulebook, which is thankfully lovely and short. But as we move on, we've got this little board. It is lovely and condensed, and then just a few extra pieces. We've got something that tells us what our win conditions are. That makes things nice and easy. We've also got things like our little gems, and we've got a game bag to put them into. So as you're playing, that will become more relevant. There is also a huge stack of cards, of little tiny cards though, so they don't take up too much room, and some privilege tokens. Now you're trying to beat a rival guild in a sort of jeweller's competition, I would say, but the theme doesn't necessarily matter. It makes for nice cards, it makes for nice little gems and little tokens, but it doesn't drive you in any way. It's going to build regardless of whether you know that or not. And actually what you're doing is you're creating something to begin with. You're using gems, which you're allowed to pick off the board, in order to buy cards, in order to then buy more expensive cards that get you more points or get you more opportunities for victory. It's a game that builds really nicely because you start feeling really satisfied with what you've created and then wanting to move on to doing more, and actually can I get this, and oh no actually because it looks like my opponent's focusing on that win condition, so I need more crowns or I need more points, or you see how it goes. Setup is blissfully simple. So what you're going to need to do is just separate out the cards into piles first. Now 4 of them are going to give you extra bonuses, so they just need to be where all players can see them. The rest of them are numbered. You'll see there's little dots on the back to show which one they are, and there are less of them as you get higher. They're the more powerful cards. So what you'll need to do is put down your first stack and reveal the top row of 3, the second row of 4, and the bottom row of 5. Then with the game board where everyone can see it, chuck those tokens into the game bag, give it a good jiffle and pop those in from the centre. So you're going to take one out, pop it in the centre and follow around the little arrows that go around the board until the board is full. Now, I'm just going to talk about your first round here because there are options for what you can do on your turn, but in your first couple of rounds, what you're going to be looking to do is to take some of those gemstones. You can take 3 that are in a row, and they can be in any diagonal or vertical or horizontal, it doesn't matter, but the 3 have to be in a row. Alternatively, you can take a gold token. Now I'll tell you a little bit more about gold tokens in a moment. You can only have one of those, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But what you're trying to do with collecting these gems is to get enough to be able to buy the cards that are in the marketplace. So for example, if I wanted this card, I would need 2 emeralds and I would need 3 rubies in order to do it. So I'm going to be weighing up my options as to which gems I can try and take, but also considering that my fellow player is actually going to take some as well, and that might ruin my plans. So each turn so far, all we've done is take some gems. But mine's now going to be a little bit different because now I can afford to buy a card. So that's going to be my action instead. I'm going to take a card and it's going to be that one. The reason I want this card and the reason I want any cards at all is to get something, right? So in this case, I'm going to get a point that you can see this is worth 1 point in the corner, and we're trying to get to 20 points. So every point helps. But also this one is great because it also gives me a permanent gem, or that's how I've always referred to it at least. So this bit in the corner shows me that my diamonds are now upped by 1. So if I put that in my play count, I no longer have just 1 diamond, which is from getting a token, but now I'm considered to have 2. And those stay there forever. So once you build those up, you only need a couple of tokens to start topping up your ability to buy cards. And there will also be times when you can buy cards just with what you've got. Now the cards are all very different, and the higher up the tiers you go, and you can go up tiers anytime you want to, the more expensive they are, but the more you get from them. Now I said one of the ways to win was to get to 20 points, but you could also win by getting to 5 crowns, and actually that's not that many when you look at some cards giving you 3 crowns, for example, but they're expensive. So while you're trying to toil away at that, your fellow player might be racking up those points and all of a sudden they've beaten you. Now the other way to win this is to have 10 of the same colour available. Now also on this card, some of them will have little icons which will give you extra things you can do. So it might be that you can immediately take another turn, or it might be that you can pick a gem of that colour off of the existing board if there's one there. It doesn't work if it isn't. So sometimes, although it may not be your best move, it may give you the tactical advantage, so they're worth keeping an eye on. In all honesty, I forget about them quite a lot of the time, and then I'm always surprised and like, great, I get an extra here, whereas really you should use them more tactically. Now, the other things I haven't mentioned is the icons that are on the card that look like a random bunch of gems. You can put those down under anyone that you already have as your permanent card. So it's like your Uno any colour kind of card, but it has to be put with one that you already have. So in my case, in this example, I've got a diamond card, which means I could put it down beneath the diamond card and now have 2. If I had a full board of different ones, I could put them in different places. Other things not mentioned yet are pearls. Pearls are harder to get hold of, so they can be quite competitive to try and get. So anything that gives you an opportunity to take your opponent's pearl or to replan the board so that you get more things out sometimes can be a real winner. And so now we'll talk about privilege, because while you're picking gemstones from the board, you'll notice there are the pearls. If you pick up 2 pearls in one turn, your opponent gets to take the privilege, which is these cute little scrolls. Now the benefit of privilege is you get to take 1 gem from the game board, whatever it is, and that's before your turn starts. So you can decide, actually, I desperately need 3 green gems. They are not close enough together, so I'm going to pay the privilege to get 1 of those green gems. I'll get 2 on my turn, and then I'll also grab something else that's on the end to add to my collection. Fab. Also the same if your opponent manages to get 3 tokens of one colour. So basically, where one player gets an advantage in something by taking the 2 pearls that are in the game, or by taking 3 of the same colour so that they have an immediate boost to their availability, the other player gets an advantage, which is that privilege token that lets them take almost an extra gem of any choice going forward. So that's your optional action at the beginning. The other thing you can choose to do is replenish the board. So if you're looking at it and you're like, hey, there's basically nothing left. We've taken loads, we've bought loads, there's only 2 left. I either can't move or I don't want to. Before your turn, you can replenish the board, and you do that just by putting them back all around in that order that we had following the arrow so that it all fills back in. You can also gain a privilege when your fellow player decides to replenish the board, so just keep that in mind. A few more things to know. The royal cards, which are at the bottom, that I said give you a couple of different bonuses or options, are attained by getting a certain number of crowns. So when you reach 3 crowns, you can take one, for example. When you reach 6 crowns, you can take another one. And they don't count as your action, so you get those for free and you resolve any effects of them. One of them is just worth points. That's always a good grab if that's what you're going for. The other ones will give you points but less, and an action that you can take, so maybe you get another turn immediately after this one or something along those lines. Now, I avoided talking about the goals, so we'll come back to that now. You can choose, instead of taking a row or taking a couple of gems, you can take 1 gold token and you use that gold token in order to then reserve a card that you may want to buy later. So say you're desperately saving for something, you don't want your opponent to get to it before you do, grab a gold tile, reserve that card by bringing it into your own player area, and then you also have gold. Now the gold is actually really useful because that once it's reserved, it doesn't need to stay on it, and you can use that as an any gem. So that sometimes can be the bridge between when your other player is holding certain tiles and you need them, so you have that gold in order to be able to do it. It does mean you're not collecting multiple gems that turn, but sometimes, especially before a replenish of the board, can be a really tactical move. There's also no penalties for having reserved cards at the end, so sometimes it's worth it just to get the gold. And the last thing to know before you play is that you can't have more than 10 gems in your player area at any point. If you want to get more, you then need to take some away and put them in your discard. That stops a player from hoarding too many of them and stopping anyone from being able to do anything. Now, why do I like it so much? I think it's hugely satisfying. Now, I played the original Splendor, as many of us probably have, and it is great fun. I think there's no harm to it. You should absolutely go out and buy that. It's had a new reskin. It is fantastic. But I do feel like the dual one is a little bit tighter. I like the prestige allows you to get bonuses in different areas. It allows this sort of, no one is charging forward because there's always something to level the playing field a little bit. So it always feels like players are just sort of eking forward, and the win is never guaranteed or never out of the window. You're not going to get to round 2 and go, I can't win. There's a lot that you can do to claw that back and to get extra allowances and extra bonuses. I think it's one of those games where once you've played 1 round, 2 rounds, people immediately start understanding. Sometimes it's best instead just to set it up, to play it out, get a few rounds in and then go, I get what we need to do. And then you play again and then you go, oh, okay, new tactics, let's go again. And you keep rolling until you start realising different things. There's a moment where people click when they know that the pearl tokens are actually quite important, and getting hold of those can be quite tactical too, because they're only limited. There are much less of those than there are others. It may be that someone is particularly good at utilising the crowns, or particularly good at soaring ahead with points, or just building a big enough engine that at the end they come back and they just take everything. I think it's an incredible sort of masterpiece of a game that really drags you in and lets you do a lot with quite a small amount of stuff and amount of discussion as well. I think it's a very clever game. Now, the downsides to this game are sort of the admin element, because there's a lot to keep track of, there's a lot to remember, but I think you get that in time. So on your first turn, you're probably not going to remember that you need royal cards, and then maybe on the second one you suddenly remember, oh, I've only remembered like every 1 in 3 to use my little bonuses that I get on each card that I take that's worth a decent amount of points, or actually I didn't utilise the fact that I could have had more privilege tokens and I never spent those privilege tokens, and actually I should have been doing that. And because there are so many different ways to win, it's a lot of things to then remember and consider to begin with. But when I say a lot, it's realistically not a lot, and actually play teaches you all of these. Play a couple of rounds of it, play a couple of games of it, and you'll be mastering it in absolutely no time. And ultimately, it's icon led. So if you're good at reading icons and you can remember to check back as what they are, all the information you need is given in front of you. You should very rarely need to refer back to the rulebook, but it's there if you need it, and it's not too long either. I think it's clear why I've been playing this a lot recently. It's just a nice little game. It fits in my bag. I can take it with me and I can explain it very, very quickly. And equally, because it builds and because it gets so satisfying at the end, it's suitable for newbies. So I've played this with a friend who has never really played past sort of like Monopoly and Scrabble and those sorts of games, whereas now she's played this. She beats me. She always does better than I do. She sort of asks me of something similar, which is always good because that's a dive into the industry that we can keep going. So I hope this video has been helpful. If you've been thinking about picking up a copy of Splendor Duel, I think you absolutely should. I think it's a really great variant of the game. I think it's a really good option for 2 players. I would absolutely recommend it, and I hope this has been helpful in figuring out how to set it up as well, because sometimes it's easier to look than it is to read the rulebook. Although this one's not so bad, admittedly. But I'll leave you there. We have been Tabletop Gaming, the publishers of a monthly board game magazine. Well, everything. Board games, card games, trading card games, war games, miniatures, everything in between, RPGs. We've got a little bit of it all. Do check that out. I'll pop a link in the description. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoy playing Splendor Duel.